Hey, everybody, it's AB Stoddard with the Bulwark. I'm back with my friend, Bill Kristol, one of our fearless leaders and co-author of Morning Shots. You should be reading it every morning. He is also the editor at large. And I'm so glad to be with you, Bill. It's a big day. The Harris-Walz ticket has taken flight. We had some mixed feelings because we have been cheering unabashedly for the pick of Josh Shapiro, but last night was very encouraging, and I'm curious to know your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think you and I probably had similar experiences. And of course, everything happens in warp speed now. So it's literally, what are we, just over 24 hours since we heard the announcement of who it was going to be. Not even the announcement, just the report of who it was going to be. Less than 24 hours since that rally in Philadelphia last night. I feel like I've already been through like 3 cycles of real disappointment that it wasn't Shapiro and real concern about what this said about Harris, to kind of grudging, okay, you know what, it's going to be okay, to watch that I missed the rally live as I was doing something, but hearing pretty good things about it, but being a little suspicious because you can't trust people. Then watching it later on last night myself, watching the whole thing pretty much, and thinking, you know what, this is pretty good, and maybe it's actually working out fine. And then I talked with a Republican operative last night, late, who was saying, you know, he's thought a lot about it, and maybe it's better to have Shapiro as governor of Pennsylvania there for 90 days, really, just trying to deliver the state, instead of a VP candidate who spends half his time out of the state, more than half probably, and spends half his time explaining things Harris has said. Now he just gets to be Shapiro, you know, and maybe Whitmer gets to be Whitmer, and they deliver the states. And Wisconsin, a little more complicated, but there's a Democratic governor there too, Evers, and a good state chairman, Winkler. And maybe it's all for the best to have this kind of affable, slightly less controversial, but talented politician from Minnesota as the number 2.
And you talked about Happy Warriors in the newsletter this morning in Morning Shots. To talk a little bit about that it really hit me last night, and then you articulated it so well that he's just smiley, and they both give off a very happy. They're using the word joyful. They're using the word joy intentionally, and they give off a very happy vibe. And just, I like the way you described this morning what a difference that makes. What it feels different, and that Trump and Vance are morose
and surly and sort of backward looking. I did this conversation with Carville that's up now, actually. The Conversations with Bill Kristol series you've been on, and Carville, very distinguished people only, are on that. And James really stressed this. I mean, he said off camera, but also on camera. I mean, off camera part, he said, we overthink this stuff sometimes. On camera, he just put it more straightforwardly and said, look, she's got to be the future. He's the past. She's the, forward-looking, upbeat. He's backward-looking. And I don't know if he used the word surly or morose, but that's in a way what he intimated. And I think it's really true, especially with Trump and Vance, who each in their own way. I mean, Trump actually helps himself when he takes the edge off his resentment and grievance politics by being sort of funny, right? Borscht Belt shtick. You sort of think wouldn't be that bad a guy to have dinner with, because, once he is, apart from his own little pet peeves, he's actually sort of enjoys life. I mean, in his own crazy and vulgar way, but whatever. Vance, I mean, is a more, I think, darker figure where you get the sense all it is a mess of, resentments and dislike of the world we're living in and so forth. But anyway, that's who they are. I think the contrast is very good for Harris and Walz. And incidentally, I think it's a contrast they can emphasize by having people like Shapiro on stage with them, depending on what state they're in. I was thinking about this, watching it last night. Don't you think they should have the Shapiros, the Whitmers, the others, especially if they're kind of youngish, and Bashir, they should have those people on stage with them all the time. 2 is better than 1, and 3 is better than 2, I think. But I think the forward-looking, upbeat messaging is a good contrast. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think it's really important to show the rest of the country, you got to take a chance on this, put Biden in the rearview mirror, and instead of like thinking of this as doubling down on Democrats, this is a new Democratic Party. They're pragmatists, they're governing reformers, whatever. They're young, they're capable, they're competent, and they're charming, and like really spread the wealth so that people get a sense that they should take a chance on this next iteration of the Democratic Party. And that really, having those people around and visible and out doing surrogate work I think will really help that, really obviously create a contrast to Biden, but more importantly to Trump and Vance. I was just really struck by the response that I got from people last night and this morning that they don't want to hear about Shapiro, who I want to talk to you about in my next question, but they just think that Tim Walz is adorable. They just think he's affable, lovable, likable, and they were taken in by his charm, and that is right. That's invaluable. And there's just so it's so interesting. None of them are really thinking strategically. They're just like, hey, I'm along for the ride, and it's just a good vibe, but very different from her. I mean, again, they're just right. They're just different people. I think we do. Tim and Sarah talked about this last night on The Next Level. I think people go overboard in the Democratic Party thinking that you can just like put a guy who wears a T-shirt who's from Minnesota in the middle of a group of like Trumpers or whatever, and he'll be persuasive. I mean, it's not. He's just very different from Harris, which I think is a nice balance. It doesn't mean he's going to bring in Republicans. We're not going to get out over our skis here, but I think that the instant response to his vibe is so positive, and it's going to make people take a second listen. Now, before we get to Shapiro, let's talk about about the downside. Obviously, I'm one of those people that thinks that, Tampax in men's bathrooms in high school is not really the kind of thing I want centrist voters to be watching ads about. And clearly the riots after the murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020 were not handled well by Tim Walz as governor of Minnesota. And then there's a whole thing about her supporting, bail funds for people who were arrested. How sort of salient do you think that is with the middle that's left? We have a lot of people that already know how they're going to vote, and they've probably decided in the last 2 weeks that they trust Harris enough if they're going to go with her. But the Republicans are jumping on Walz in any way they can. So relieved they don't have to deal with Shapiro. What do you think about his sort of vulnerabilities?
I think there are voters who are in play. I mean, we've seen a movement of about 6 points in the last 2 weeks from Biden, the last Biden polls to the current Harris polls, probably basically gone from -3 to +3 Democratic. She's approaching pretty much Biden's final numbers in 2020, which are winning numbers. So that's good. But some of those people could go back. Some of them could choose not to vote, or she could continue the momentum. And there's probably another 3, 4, 5, 6 points potentially to be picked up. Trump is always tapped out at around 46, 47. So, you can get a lead of up to maybe 6, even 7. But I think things are in play. I think those are vulnerabilities. In politics, you can't wish away vulnerabilities, and you can't make them positives usually. What you can do is just make them less salient vulnerabilities. So I think, I'm not sure on this, you'd have to really be doing full time and test it probably. I'm not sure what the best response is. Some of the responses are just responses. No, you don't understand. He called out the National Guard sooner than you think. And Trump was the one who was slow in calling it out. And no, you don't understand. The state legislature passed this law, which had to do with a million things. And one tiny provision had to do with bathrooms. And this was not something I don't know if this is even true, but I mean, something he, made a big deal of. And you can answer these things. You probably have to do that at some level. I'm not trying to spend a lot of money answering these charges, though, in detail. The other way to answer charges is to sort of go at them, I don't know what the right term is, sort of orthogonally. No, we're tough on crime. She's a prosecutor. She locked up all these people. Crime went down under Biden. I mean, there are things you can say that at least take the edge off the attempt to make her and Governor Walz look like very soft on crime types. And I think she has a bit of an advantage on that as the prosecutor. And she had a pretty good ad I saw yesterday where she kind of merges two strands of being a prosecutor. She's tough on violent crime, sexual predators. She's also tough on big banks that are ripping off consumers and big businesses that are ripping off small businesses. I can't remember exactly what the ad was, but that's not a bad two-pronged kind of economic populism on the one hand and tough on crime message on the other. Both of them connected to her having been a prosecutor, and I take it legitimately that she prosecuted these cases as AG or as a district attorney. So they do have to, but they have to answer them, and they can't just float along on good feelings. I mean, good feelings are important. I've always been worried that with Walz, at some point they evaporate and you're back to kind of the nuts and bolts issues. I think they don't evaporate simply. Images matter, and they keep that going for quite a while. And it does say something. And I think one last point just on, I think he helps her. I thought that last night. I mean, she's not as natural a politician as Walz is, I think, or as Shapiro for that matter. And seeing Walz must make her feel a little more comfortable, a little more upbeat. She can have a tendency to get a little, not harsh, but just a little, I don't know, less, effective maybe. You saw some of that in 2019. She can also be quite effective at times. I just think, look, if he helps her some, that's probably a big value add to the ticket. But on these issues, I think they just need to deal with them and have a plan to deal with them and expect tens of millions of dollars to be spent against them, and not tell themselves, as other candidates from Mike Dukakis on through John Kerry have, well, that's ridiculous. That's not going to go anywhere, or we're better off just ignoring it, or I'm going to explain everything at great length. But, they need to be aggressive in playing defense, if I can put it that way, as well as litigating their own agenda for the future and stressing future. And some of those things can be answered in the future tense, right? I'm going to be tough on crime. Believe me, I am not. Right. This is one of the things that's very important to me and to Governor Walz as President of the United States. And we're going to be whatever on other issues. And we're not going to be pushing left-wing, I say this exactly, left-wing culture war, obsessions as president. One thing I don't know, I'm curious what you thought about this. I was struck by one of the dogs that didn't bark last night watching the Philadelphia rally. Was if this rally had happened in 2019, there would have been 19 minor left-wing culture war obsessions involved in it, which wouldn't incidentally have meant they were terrible people or whatever. They would be a bad president, vice president, but would have turned off a lot of voters. And I thought there was none of that last night. That rally could have been from, I don't know, 1992 or 1964, basically. Couldn't it have been standard, liberal, upbeat, pro-American, pro-future, pro-inclusion kind of message, and not just message, but feeling, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that she focused that only in America could the two of them have come together to be, to be on a ticket that can make it to the White House. And I agree with you. I thought it was narrowly focused, patriotic, pragmatic, focused on the future. She's very good about her stump. I like that she includes that. The opening, her opening is about being a prosecutor, and she knows Donald Trump's type. She always talks about how she fought consumer fraud or whatever she did, which is popular. And then she goes at, I know Donald Trump's type, whatever, but her policy laundry list in her speech is focused on kitchen table, which I hate that expression, but bread and butter issues that face single people or families, she's not tone deaf about inflation the way Biden was, because he's defensive. She wants to talk about bringing costs down, and prices are too high, and that's in the stump speech. And I think it's important that just tells me she's sensitive to what people really care about. They want to hear a little about Trump, but not too much. So I think she's keen that way. I think she comes off as a total politician, and so does Josh Shapiro. I think the gift of Tim Walz is that he does not come across like a politician at all. And there is something to that. I mean, that in a lot of ways was the appeal of Donald Trump, not only what he was saying about breaking the system down, but just that he's just like this other, right, outsider guy. And that I think you can't buy that. I mean, that's sort of, Josh Shapiro is cerebral, he's intentional, he's hyper educated. He's extremely impressive, but he comes across as very in control, and Tim Walz just comes off as, your neighbor. So I watching him give a speech and then react and everything, I just felt like that just has much more appeal than we were thinking about before, they made the decision. Now, since she made the decision, there was a lot of strategic leaking about how, and I don't know why they did it. I'm interested in your thoughts. Was the strategic leaking a way to divert us away from the fact that she buckled under pressure from the left and was afraid of protests at the convention that started in Chicago and went to every campus across America all through September and all through October, and dampened, young vote, left vote, whatever. And so she didn't pick Josh Shapiro because he's pro-Israel. So she intentionally leaked that Josh Shapiro is quite ambitious. And in their meeting, it didn't go as well as her one with Walz, because Shapiro was asking specific questions about what he would do as vice president. And he didn't get it, that you're just supposed to take a back seat and roll with the fast moving car of a presidency. But Tim Walz basically told her, I'm not interested in being president, and I'm just going to run through a brick wall for you. That is those are the words that was probably paraphrased, but that is the message that he gave her, is that he's going to do whatever he can. He'll take whatever duties, and that pleased her, that he had no ego about it, and that Josh Shapiro's, quote, ambition became an issue. So that either is true, and that's the primary reason, and that means that she's easily made uncomfortable and was thinking not of the threat of Donald Trump, Bill, but was thinking about herself and her presidency, that she wanted to be perfect, and that Josh would bother her in that way. Or this is really more of an issue of the threat from the left of the party, saying, from the teachers' unions to I'm not going to call them pro-Palestinian. I'm not going to whatever, the people who are against having a Jewish vice president who's pro-Israel. So what were your thoughts on that? That's sort of the dark underbelly of yesterday. And I find it concerning on several levels.
Yeah, I do a bit, though. I think it's been overstated, honestly. And I've talked to a couple of people now. They're probably, they were closer to us in terms of wishing for Shapiro, but they're also good Democrats who are, probably trying to make the best of the situation where they're a little disappointed. I'd say two things, I think. One thing that I would add to your list of all of those things must have played some role. And some of them are not crazy. We may not like teachers unions, and we may not like who are more, let's just call it, more concerned about Palestinian well-being than about Israel's security, and as you have to balance those two things. But it's not illegitimate for those people to weigh in, and it's not illegitimate for Harris and her team to, as a practical matter of winning the election, just like we've been saying, hey, practical, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Her people could say back to us, hey, practical, messed up convention and a month of having to comment
Don't divide the party
on campus. I mean, that's fair enough. Now, that's a little different from buckling to anti-Semitism and so forth. So that I think would be bad if she'd done that. I think that's a bit of a reach, though, and I don't see much evidence of that. And I don't think the Gaza thing was the top issue, incidentally. I do think. I'd say so. I think she liked the image of, she liked the idea of Walz as vice president, for reasons you said, that no competition, so to speak, from Shapiro, no less ambition. I think she also liked, though, as a political matter, I think I give her credit for this, seeing that there was a way in which Walz would be an effective partner for her politically, electorally. And Shapiro, there is a downside. I mean, we were for him, but I think we would have acknowledged this. We did acknowledge this ahead of time, and I'd certainly acknowledge it now, too. At the end of the day, Carville, I think, made this point in passing when we talked. Harris Shapiro is San Francisco and Philadelphia, two elite lawyers. And it is sort of the caricature of the bi-coastal elite Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Even though Shapiro himself is moderate and sort of anti-left. And Walz really is, from Nebraska, then Minnesota, high school teacher, football coach. And that's, if you think you've been hurt, I mean, there's something a little contradictory about all these modern types who spent 25 years yelling about how the party has to get back in touch with middle class and working class people and with, regular people and look less elitist, which I don't disagree with. That was obviously part of Clinton's talent and Biden's talent, actually, electorally. Going with the high school football coach who's got a real nice manner and good stories to tell, but also is pretty liberal, so the progressives are fine with him, even happy about him. Also has that personal IVF story, which is nice and genuinely nice story, but also fits into the agenda. I mean, it wasn't be crazy for Harris to just think, look, I'm just politically better off with this. I'll give up a little maybe in Pennsylvania. I'm not picking him. Though Shapiro can go work hard in Pennsylvania for the next 80 days anyway. And I get this better complementarity on the ticket, as it were, than having two lawyers. I mean, every winning Democratic ticket, I think I'm right about this, in modern times, has had someone who was kind of a man of the people to go along with the elite,
Yeah.
legal type and coastal type. And, Clinton himself was that, obviously, in 92 to go with Gore. And obviously Biden did compliment Obama. I do think it was not that different, probably, in that respect, from the Obama-Biden pick. A little different because Biden was a senator for all those years, chairman of foreign relations. So that was a pick that, helps reassure people on foreign policy. There's none of that here. But in terms of affect, you might say, it's your, extremely well-educated Black African-American lawyer on the one hand, and, let's go a little middle America, Scranton Joe or Minneapolis Tim, as the complementary candidate. So I think that was probably more important than the personal dynamic. The other final point, someone who was pretty close to the whole situation told me this, you never know what's exactly true, that actually the Shapiro meeting she wasn't put off by him, that it was a very candid meeting. But Shapiro had said, look, I'm not sure I'm a great vice president. I mean, I like being governor. I like running things. Of course, he's going to be, he said, I'm sure I'm going to be loyal to you if you make decisions. But honestly, I'm not, maybe I'm better just being a good governor of Pennsylvania and you should take someone else. I think he said something like that. I don't think that was entirely insincere. It's probably a little bit insincere, I think he still wanted the vice presidential nod. But I think they had a pretty candid discussion, actually. And they're both pretty grown-up people. We're not talking about, 23-year-olds on a first date here. Though sometimes you feel like these politicians are like 23-year-olds on a first date, or I don't know, or it says 17-year-olds on a first date. I don't know, but I don't think that was the case with Shapiro and Harris. I think they both, had some understanding of the situation. So I guess I'm on the whole on the optimistic side of understanding Harris's intentions.
That's a really good point about Shapiro, and I think that he is a really smart guy. I mean, you're right about two elite Democrats and lawyers, and Tim Walz. No, he is every man. I mean, he just is. He has that, and Trump and Vance, they can't take that away from him, and it just works. He also seems to really like Harris and put her at ease, and she sort of was she was really smiley during his speech, and it seemed really good. And that's also quite valuable. What's interesting is Josh Shapiro probably studied Harris under Biden and realized that she's not a good number two. And that's why we're seeing a much different Kamala Harris than we've ever seen before, because she wasn't good at being under Joe Biden. She wasn't free to be herself, and she was awkward. And now she's not. She's confident and warm and different. And so that's really a good observation on his part. And he will work harder than anybody for her to win Pennsylvania, just as the others will, because, first of all, if Trump comes in, they might not get a chance at 2028, but also that's how you move up in the party, right? They're gonna do what they can to deliver the state, and I think that's that's critical, and that's not a worry. Speaking of babies and 23-year-olds and 17-year-olds, I was a little bit disappointed to see John Fetterman leaked that he has real problems with Josh Shapiro and his ambition. He leaked it to the Harris people. I guess it was effective. And then he was seated in a stadium full of people giving Josh Shapiro big standing ovations and cheering. And someone got video of him sitting there with his harumph, letting everyone know that the U.S. Senator could not stand up for his governor of his own party at this really big moment for the party to be unified, and letting it. I mean, I just thought that was stunning. Anyway, let's quickly end on polls. I am really surprised at how quickly they're moving. And what are your thoughts on? You said that you think that they could even keep going. What do you think about sort of the next? We have Tim Walz. Everyone will drill down on him for a good 12 days. And then the convention starts. That'll be more like stuff about Harris that no one's ever known, and more excitement and more Hollywood. What do you think about? Are we on a sugar high? What are your thoughts? I'm so surprised at how quickly it's moved.
I mean, that is the big question. I guess I would be disappointed if I were the Harris campaign if they don't pick up 2 or 3 more points in the next 2 weeks. I think they should be shooting to come out of the Democratic convention plus 5 or 6, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
That would put you just a bit ahead of the final vote with Biden. Also, we still think these polls could still be missing some Trump vote, right? I mean, we went through in 2016 and 2020 the experience of Trump outperforming the final polls by 2 to 4 points. So, I think to be comfortable in Harris world, you'd want to be plus 7 or 8 even. It seems like a very big number. I don't think it's out of the question. Anyway, I think they want to come out of the Democratic convention, really out of August into Labor Day with a real lead. I mean, not a definitive lead, but a real lead. Puts more pressure on Trump, allows Harris, I think, to get in his head more, challenge him to debates, but also not worry too much if the debate doesn't work out, if you're ahead 6, 7 points. So I just think it gives you a big advantage if she could hold that. If she holds the current lead, okay, that's pretty good, much better than she was, and then the Democrats were 3 weeks before. If the lead dissipates over the next 2 to 3 weeks, then it would suggest kind of a sugar high, maybe millions of dollars of ads that we may not be seeing all of, as they're digital, are making a dent on the crime issue and many or other issues against Harris and Walz. And so I think it remains the case. I think we said 2 weeks ago that the next month's very important, and we're now halfway through that month, and these next 2 weeks are very important. Yeah, very important how the convention ends up, where she stands at the end of the Democratic convention.
Okay, well, Bill, I will not be with you next Wednesday. I'll be on vacation, so I will see you in the middle of the Wednesday, the 21st of August, in the middle of the Democratic convention. Lord only knows what will have happened by then. And I'll look forward to it. Everyone stay at the Bulwark's YouTube channel, because we have stuff coming every day. It will only be growing as the news continues to snowball. So we'll see you. Everyone else will see you here, and we'll see you back in 2 weeks.